Hello, in this video we're going to go ahead and talk about domain and range from graphs and now tie in the idea of a graph or a relation being a function. And how we're going to do this is with the vertical line test. Our objective is students will be able to identify the domain and range of graphs and determine if it is a function using the vertical line test. For prior knowledge, we want to go ahead and bring back in interval notation, and here we're working with a simple x-axis. Remember, interval notation is how you describe a set of numbers with brackets and parentheses. So here my set of numbers runs from -4 to 8, so interval notation would be -4 to 8. Now I need brackets and parentheses. I'm including -4, that value is included, so remember that's a bracket. An open circle, when you exclude a value, gets a parentheses, so this would be bracket -4, comma 8 with a parenthesis. Now for number 2, go ahead and try number 2 on your own. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to try this one on your own, and this one is bracket -1, comma, and then the arrow goes all the way out to infinity, and that's always with the parenthesis. Remember, when we're talking about a graph inside a coordinate grid, we can describe domain and range by squishing this graph down to the x-axis. So this would fall on 3 and its arrow would go all the way out to infinity. And we're going to continue working with those ideas. Remember, domain is just our x values and the range is our y values. This is prior knowledge from yesterday and was included in your notes from yesterday. Today, remember, our objective is to go ahead and determine if a function is a relation is a function using the vertical line test. The vertical line test says that if a vertical line passes through a graph more than once, the relation is not a function. And let's look at this. Here I have this graph, this relation, and I'm going to run a vertical line, and I'm going to use a pencil to see if this is a function. Notice. Well, here I have a vertical line passing through the graph, and it touches here, and it touches here. Since my vertical line touches the graph more than one spot, this is not a function. This is not a function because there are 2 y values for the same x value. And this ties back into our lesson where each x value can only have 1 y value. So since this x value here has more than 1 y value, this is not a function. I'm going to show you a series of graphs, and we want to determine if these graphs are functions. You don't need to draw the graphs or take any notes. So here I have this function, and I'm going to try my vertical line test. Notice my vertical line never touched the graph at more than any one location. As it passed through, it was always touching the graph only at one spot. So this is a function. Here I have this graph. I want you to quickly think, do you think this is going to pass the vertical line test? Let's go ahead and conduct the vertical line test. Notice my vertical line touches the graph here, here, and here. Since this fails the vertical line test, this relation is not a function. Again, I want you to pause the video and think, do you think this relation is a function? Let's go ahead and conduct my vertical line test. Notice how this passed the vertical line test. It never touched the vertical line in more than one location, so therefore this is a function. Again, I have another graph, and I want you to pause the video, think, is this going to pass the vertical line test? Now we're going to conduct the vertical line test. Since this relation touches the vertical line at more than one location here, this is not a function. So what we're doing today, we're going to have 3 examples, and these are the top 3 examples in your notes. We're going to go ahead and determine if this is a function, and then we're going to state the domain and range. Notice, I'm going to go ahead and conduct a vertical line test, and if I do this, notice, I want you to drag your pencil from here all the way across and see, does it ever touch the vertical line at any more than one location? And this does not. So we say, yes, this is a function. Because it passes the vertical line test. And we're going to abbreviate this, the VLT. Kind of like the BLT, but VLT. The domain remembers our x values, and those run from -7 to 1, -7, comma, to 1. And those are brackets. Notice I'm including those values. And the range, these are my y values. So those run from -6 all the way up to 1. Okay. Let's look at another example. Here I have a second example, and again we're going to conduct the vertical line test. If I run a series of vertical lines through this function, does it ever touch the graph at more than one location? And the answer is no. So yes, this is a function. Yes, because it passes the VLT. The domain are my x values, and if I squish this down to the x-axis, notice my function would look something like this. That domain is -infinity all the way to 4. And my range are my y values. So if I squish this to the y-axis, and I'll do this in red, if I squish it over here to 2, the arrow is going to go up. So it would be 2 to infinity. Okay, and our last example is here. We want to determine if this graph is a function, so we're going to conduct our vertical line test. And as I do this, notice as you run your pencil through that this graph touches our vertical line in more than one location. So this is not a function. Function, no, this is not a function because it fails the vertical line test. And it's important to note the vertical line test only applies to graphs. We only conduct the vertical line test with graphs. Our domain, if I flattened this to the x-axis, notice my domain, my function would start here and it would go all the way out here. Sorry, this is not a function. This graph, this relation, would start here and go all the way out to here. So the domain is -6 inclusive all the way to infinity. And then the range, I'll do this in purple. If I squish this to the y-axis, notice I have an arrow going up. Okay, and then if I squish it again down here, I have an arrow going down. So the range is actually -infinity to infinity. Okay. For closure, the question is, how do we determine if the graph of a relation is a function? And I want you to think about that for a second. How do we determine if a graph of a relation is a function? And that would be, to determine if the graph of a relation is a function, we conduct the vertical line test. Remember, our objective was to identify the domain and range of graphs, which we did, and to determine if a function is a vertical line test.